The book of Jubilees is anti-Christian garbage. And I'm going to tell you why. It's because it exalts the law. That's the whole purpose of the book. The conceit of this book is that Moses is being given the law, is being talked to by the angel of the presence, and is given this story about how the patriarchs kept the law. In its essence, that's really what the story is. That the patriarchs kept the law. And the whole purpose of this is because the time it was written, during the 2nd century before Christ, the Jews were faced with the prospect and process of Hellenization. And some of them didn't want that. And you can read all this in the book of Maccabees. That's what that's all about. And you had the Dead Sea Scroll community divorce themselves from the Jewish community at large and go out into the desert. And we can see that in the Dead Sea Scroll find, Jubilees is one of the most found books amongst that collection. And the reason is because it exalts the law. It tells us that the Jews are chosen above all people, and the law is theirs forever. It's what makes them separate. It makes them different, make them unique. So let's take a look at this in Jubilees chapter 2. This is after creation was finished, and God's speaking here, and he says, "And he said unto us, Behold, I will separate unto myself a people from among all peoples. And these will keep the Sabbath day, and I will sanctify them unto myself as my people, and will bless them. As I have sanctified the Sabbath day, and do sanctify it unto myself, even so shall I bless them. And they will be my people, and I shall be their God. And I have chosen the seed of Jacob from amongst them all that I have seen, and have written him down as my firstborn." Now, where is the seed of Jacob here? This is anachronistic. There is no seed of Jacob. There is no seed of Jacob in the first chapter of Genesis, right after creation. This is anachronistic, and the author is telling us that Jacob is chosen. Jacob is special. Now, we know that. We all know that from the Bible. But this is special in a different way, in a more solid way, as it were, because God has chosen them from the beginning and chosen them to keep his law. As we can see over here in verse 33, "This law and testimony was given to the children as a law forever unto their generations." Now, verse 31 says, "The Creator of all things blessed it, the Sabbath, but he did not sanctify all peoples and nations to keep Sabbath thereon." Meaning the law is not for the Gentiles. But we know this isn't true. The law is for all people. Gentiles, according to the scriptures, can become a part of Israel. They got to circumcise themselves, and they got to keep the law and all that kind of stuff. Ruth was a Gentile who was grafted into Israel. And she's a grandmother of David and a great-great-great-great-great-great-grandmother of Jesus Christ. So we see this is wrong. The law is not just for the Israelites. It's for all people, actually. All people are supposed to keep this law. We're all condemned by it. But let's continue. We're going to see that you have the patriarchs keeping different feasts in different parts of the law. Look at 6:17. This is after the flood. "For this reason it is ordained and written on the heavenly tables that they should celebrate the Feast of Weeks in the month once a year, to renew the covenant every year. And this whole festival was celebrated in heaven from the day of creation till the days of Noah, 26 jubilees and 5 weeks of years. And Noah and his sons observed it for 7 jubilees and 1 week of years, till the day of Noah's death. And from the day of Noah's death his sons did away with it until the days of Abraham, and they ate blood. But Abraham observed it, and Isaac and Jacob and his children observed it, up to thy days. And in thy days," that's Moses, the thy is Moses, "the children of Israel forgot it until he celebrated it anew on this mountain." So the Feast of Weeks was celebrated by Noah. Then Noah's sons forgot about it. Then Abraham and Isaac celebrated it. And then it was forgotten until it was celebrated anew on the mount. Let's take a look at verses 16. This is chapter 16. We're going to look at verse 21. Here we go. "And he built booths for himself." This is Abraham. "He built booths for himself and for his servants on this festival, and he was the first to celebrate the Feast of Tabernacles on the earth." Right. So Abraham is celebrating the Feast of Tabernacles. Now, if Abraham is celebrating the Feast of Tabernacles, that is telling us, the author is telling us, that Tabernacles does not stem from or result from the Exodus. It has no tie to the Exodus. It has ancient ties that are much ancient than the Exodus. Because you remember reading in the law that they celebrate the Tabernacles, Feast of Tabernacles, to as a memorial that they were wanderers in the desert, and so they wandered in tents. And so during Tabernacles, you build a tent and you stay in it for 7 days. Let's look at one more festival. This is chapter 34. This is verse 17. Now this is Joseph. Joseph is being told that, Jacob is being informed that Joseph is dead. So Jacob thinks that Joseph is dead. So let's see what it says. And he mourned for Joseph 1 year, and did not cease, for he said, let me go down to the grave mourning for my son. For this reason it is ordained for the children of Israel that they should afflict themselves on the 10th of the 7th month, on the day that the news which made him weep for Joseph, came to Jacob his father, that they should make an atonement for themselves thereon with a young goat on the 10th of the 7th month, once a year, for their sins, for they had grieved the affliction of their father regarding Joseph his son. And this day hath been ordained that they should grieve themselves for their sins, etc., etc. This is the origin of the atonement, the Day of Atonement, according to the book of Jubilees, the writer of the book of Jubilees. It has nothing to do with Exodus. It has nothing to do with any of that. It has to do with the supposed death of Joseph and his brothers making atonement for themselves and grieving. And we're going to look at one more verse from Jubilees, and this is going to sum it up. This is chapter 32. We're going to look at a couple verses here. And he abode that night at Bethel, and Levi dreamed that they had ordained and made him the priest of the Most High God, and his sons forever. And he awoke from his sleep and blessed the Lord. Verse 3. And in those days Rachel became pregnant with her son Benjamin, and Jacob counted his sons from him upwards, and Levi fell to the portion of the Lord. And his father clothed him in the garments of the priesthood and filled his hands. One more verse. Verse 9. And Levi discharged the priestly office at Bethel before Jacob his father, in preference to his 10 brothers, and he was a priest there. And Jacob gave his vow. Thus he tithed, again, the tithe to the Lord, and sanctified it, and it became holy unto him. Now, this verse tells us that Levi was discharging the priestly office. How is this possible? How is this possible when there was no Ark of the Covenant? There was no tabernacle. There was no instruction from the Lord on how to do the sacrifices, on how to do the proper worship, on how to make the proper garments. We have over here in verse 3, that Jacob clothed Levi in the garments of the priesthood. But we don't get those garments, a description of those garments, until they are told in the book of Exodus. You got the hat, you got the garment, the breastplate with the stones on it, you got the girdle, you got all this stuff. And we're being told that this happens here. Now, this is total contradiction to what the Bible tells us in Galatians 3:17. Here you go. Chapter 3, verse 17. And this I say, that the covenant that was confirmed before of God in Christ, the law, which was 430 years after, cannot this annul. Let's talk about Abraham. Abraham was given a promise, and then the law came 430 years after Abraham. And this book, Jubilees, is telling us that the law came right at the beginning. It's been there ever since the beginning. They're celebrating the Feast of Weeks, the Feast of Tabernacles, and the Feast of every other feast. And what they're doing when they say that is they are stripping them away from their Christological significance. If the fathers, the patriarchs, were celebrating the Feast of Weeks, the Feast of Tabernacles, well, then it has no tie to the Exodus, and thus no Christological significance. So the Christological significance is this. Christ is our Passover, who leads us from the bondage of Egypt and into the Canaan land. And he fulfills each and one of these feasts, every one of those feasts, atonement, booths, weeks, all symbolize him. He's our Passover lamb. He is the first fruits of the resurrection from the dead. So that's the festival of the first fruits. He is come to tabernacle with us in the flesh. So that's the fulfilling of other booths of the Feast of Tabernacles. And on it goes. He's our atonement. He fulfills the Feast of Atonement. And this is telling us that no, that's not what all is going on. And what makes this anti-Christian even more so is that you see, Revelation 19:10 tells us this. Focus in on there. The testimony of Jesus. For the testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy. Now, there is no testimony of Jesus in the book of Jubilees. None. There's only the exaltation of the law. You have the patriarchs keeping the feast. You have Levi executing the priestly office when there's no tabernacle to be found. You have other weird things, like in chapter 2, where Eve and Adam are separated from the garden, and Adam is outside the garden for 40 days, and then Eve is outside the garden for 80 days, which corresponds to the law of childbirth, where a boy child is unclean for 40 days, and then a female child is unclean for 80 days. And so you have things like that. All throughout Jubilees, you have them keeping the law, which didn't come until 430 years after Abraham, according to Paul. So who are you going to believe? You're going to believe Jubilees and its exaltation of the law, or are you going to believe Paul and what he says, that the law came 430 years after, and that the law is a schoolmaster to lead us to Christ? This does not point to the law being a schoolmaster. This does not say the law is a schoolmaster to lead us to Christ. This book says that the law is eternal, and it's for the nation of Israel. It's not for the Jews. It's not for the Gentiles, It's not for anybody outside the nation of Israel. And so if you're reading this book, and you're going to think you're going to get some spiritual benefit out of it, you're not. You're absolutely not. It's filled with false theology about the law, no testimony of Jesus. The Bible is replete with testimony. All the prophets testify of Jesus Christ. You can read in Luke 24 on the road to Emmaus, where Jesus started with Moses and went through the prophets and showed how they testified of him. The book of Jubilees does not testify of Jesus. It also has unhistorical things like Jacob killing Esau. Where is that? Where's that? That's found in the testimony of the 12 patriarchs, which is also not scripture, but it's not found in the Bible. It's not referred to in the Bible. Josephus doesn't mention it. It's totally made up, bogus junk. It didn't happen. It never happened. Nothing in the book of Jubilees happened. The patriarchs weren't keeping the law. They weren't keeping the feast. Nothing happened. Nothing in Jubilees happened. It's all a lie. So when you see junk like this on YouTube, forbidden knowledge, why the book of Jubilees was banned. Jubilees is a banned book. Well, you can know that's all a bunch of crap. It's all a lie. Book of Jubilees was never in the Bible. It's never part of the Bible. It's pseudepigrapha. It doesn't testify of Jesus Christ. And in fact, the book of Jubilees is anti-Christian garbage.